Okay, this person says, "Hello, love. May I ask you something a bit tender? My parents have been gone for some time now, and still I find myself holding on to things, old hurts, words unsaid, things they could have done better, or not done at all. I want to let it go, to make some kind of peace, but how do you truly forgive people who are no longer here to hear it? Is it even possible to find that kind of closure with the dead?" Okay, well, that's tricky. That is tricky because, it's hard enough to do it with them when they're alive, and I think a lot of the difficulties with parent stuff is people kind of run into this thing of they're, having it out with their 80-year-old parents about stuff that happened or their parents did when they were 50 or 40. A much younger, much more unconscious version of their parents, and yet the child is like demanding, justice. And don't get me wrong, they deserve justice, and they've got very good reasons, their claims on justice are very justified. Like, some of the things that parents get up to are atrocious, and most parents, they don't want to know. It takes a very special kind of parent to want to know about it and to be able to hear it, because from the parents' point of view, they were doing everything they could. They were doing everything they could to provide for the child. And from the parents' point of view, they're thinking about their childhood. And they're like, "Well, you had shoes, didn't you? I gave you shoes, And the child is like, "Yeah, but," the adult child is like, "Yeah, but you weren't there for me emotionally, And that's kind of, as I see it, it's like the progression of consciousness, The stuff that the parents had to deal with, which was the no shoes, the basic survival stuff, they were able to move on enough to be able to provide that for their kids. And from their kids' point of view, it's like, "Yeah, but it wasn't enough. Well, like, I wanted more, And the parents are like, "My God, if you'd seen what I had, if you'd seen what I had to deal with, And again, like, that takes quite a bit of perspective to be able to see that and to not get upset about it, It takes a lot of compassion, a lot of kindness, lots of love to be able to accept the way evolution works. Evolution of consciousness. And you can kind of go, "Yeah, I get that as a concept." Well, it can be tricky to live it, because to live it means to accept that it's going to be easier for future generations. That's where people get stuck. They kind of, it's like the cliche of the way people complaining about millennials, about how they're so, like, they feel so entitled and they're so sensitive, and oh my God, you can't say anything to them. Of course that's the way they're going to be, because everything's moved forward and they are able to talk about things that we weren't able to talk about, or the previous generation weren't able to talk about. And it's great. But it's, you have to really come into yourself and be able to not begrudge it to them, and to not kind of go, "Oh, they didn't have it tough, I can remember being involved in a sales thing years and years ago. And, I'm a sensitive person. Me being in a sales thing is a terrible idea. That's kind of obvious now, but at the time it wasn't obvious to me. So I'm in this sales thing, and this guy who was like teaching me about sales, he became exasperated with me for some reason. And he was saying, "You won't know you really want it till you're shaving in cold water in a public toilet." I was like looking at him going, that is a very specific and strange analogy. Why? I don't get it. And like, it's obvious that that's what he had to do. So in his mind, it's like, unless you've reached that point and you see yourself doing that, then you're never gonna, you don't really want it like you're supposed to want it, So it's kind of the same with with generations, future generations or generations that are coming through. Is that feeling of like, can I let them have it? Can I let it be easier for them, Anyway, it's around the same thing of this person, but can I forgive my parents? It's like doing that the other way and kind of going, considering what they had to come through, considering the consciousness. Like, I'm walking around Dublin right at the moment, and this is like the town I was born in and raised in. But, what it's like now is so different. When I think about what it was like when I was a kid, back in the 60s, it was like the Dark Ages, It was absolutely like the Dark Ages. I mean, I've said this before, but like I can remember watching Mad Men and the casual violence that was done to children, The neighbor would just slap your child if they thought they were getting out of line. And I could totally relate to that. I was like, yeah, I remember that. I don't think I was ever slapped by a neighbor, but that kind of casual slapping, it went on. It definitely went on. So that was not surprising to me. That was not surprising to me at all. So with the parents, it's very hard with parents to, like people often want to try and confront the parents and have it out with them. If your parent is up for it, great, but most parents aren't. And it's like, well, what, they should just get away with it? And I don't know, I don't really think of it like that. I kind of think of it, how is it in you? Can you find a place of peace inside yourself about your parents? Because if you can't, you're just going to be miserable regardless of what happens. And if it has to come from, if you have to get the parent, your happiness means the parent is going to say sorry for being such a shit parent. Then you're always going to be unhappy, because no parent will ever really admit that, because they all think they were a great parent, and they were with what they had. That's the tricky bit. That's the very tricky bit. And the hard bit about death is that once they are dead, all the possibility of them, of you being able to get some sort of closure with them, it's over. It's just gone. You're just not going to get it. And that is the hard bit about your parents dying. So, firstly, I mean, this person's parents are gone, but if your parents are alive, if you can come to a place of peace about everything, about the injustices, about everything, if you can come to a place of peace about that before they die, you will be doing yourself a huge favor, because you'll be giving yourself the favor of a sort of closure that will be much harder to do once they're gone. So I don't know how well you're going to be able to hear me over this music. So if you can do that when they're alive, brilliant. If not, if they're gone, then, I mean, in a way, it's kind of going back to what was the truth of your relationship with them, even when they're alive. Meaning, the things you are upset about to do with your parents are, as I say, they're from an earlier version of who your parents were. They're of the version of your parents who were 20 or 25 or whatever. So that version of your parents, it doesn't exist anymore. So you're kind of coming to terms with that, and you're understanding the consciousness that they were trying to struggle, or their unconsciousness that they were kind of struggling through back then. And you're kind of going, yeah, well, let me think about their parents. Let me think about the circumstances they came through as a way to help you access compassion. Because once you can start to access compassion for your parents, you're accessing your own nature. And then once you can access your own nature, then all sorts of wonderful, magical things can happen, because you're not kind of caught up in your own unconsciousness of, I don't care. I don't care about what they came through. I don't care about what their parents were like. I don't care about what the world was like back then. They did this terrible thing to me. So it's like a balance, you know. On the one hand, you have to acknowledge what they did, and give to yourself and the part of you that was wounded by that, deeply wounded by that. You have to acknowledge that and go, yeah, that was terrible. But then you also have to give the compassion to them and go, all things considered, that was the best they could do. And I've had this conversation with somebody recently about, the best. And it's so easy to get judgmental about people and people's best, and to kind of go, they weren't doing their best. They could have done better. Okay? I have found that everybody is doing their best. That inside everybody, there is a being just like you in there doing their best to live what their nature is. Everybody is the same like that. That's one thing. The other thing is what their best is. So that person's best might be that they are a robber, or that they're very bitchy, or they're very manipulative, or whatever. It's very easy to conflate those two and go, they could be doing a lot better. They could be not robbing people. They could be not being so bitchy, which I don't find helpful, and very hard. It makes it very hard for me to access my compassion. Whereas when I can separate out those two things, I go, okay, I can see the being in there doing their best to live their authentic life, to live who they are, to live the love that they are on the inside. I can see that's what's going on. But when I keep that separate, then I can also go, yeah, and their best is they're a robber or a thief. It's kind of like that old saying of like, trust everybody but don't leave your wallet on the bar. It's kind of a version of that. But it's also this thing of, when you can separate them out, you can be compassionate to the being that's doing its best, and that you're not judging that at all. But then you can also, with a lot of compassion and with a lot of like just clarity, you can just kind of go, yeah, but this is what their best is. So let me respond to that. Let me not just be naive and just go, oh, I can see them, they're trying so hard. That's a recipe for just getting stolen from or abused. It's like, I know they're in there doing their best, but this is what their best is at the moment, and I'm going to respond to that. When you do that, it's a lot, you sort of run into a lot less trouble with people. So same kind of thing, apply that to the parents. They were doing their best. Their best was terrible. Their best damaged me for life. That's all true. And it's not easy. Maybe I should have said that at the beginning. Like reconciling with parents who are dead, it's not easy because they're gone. You can't have the conversation with them. But I don't think you can have the conversation with them anyway when they're alive. But you can do the same thing. You can come to a place of peace about it with them on the inside, because you can access your compassion by kind of going, well, okay, well, they were doing their best and their best was terrible. And those two things are separate but coexist. When you can do that, when you can say they were doing their best, that allows you to feel compassion towards them, your parents, and what they were coming through, and the amount of unconsciousness they had to deal with, and the amount of unconsciousness that was in the world around them that they had to deal with. You can do that. But then you can also say their best was terrible. It was, I'm deeply scarred by it. And that allows you to have compassion for yourself and go, yeah, they really messed me up. I've got deep wounds. I'm still processing it, And so you can give to both. That's the only way I know to find some sort of peace with people in general, but specifically with our parents, which is a much more heated kind of intense dynamic.